Hello, I'm Corey Hello, and welcome to another episode of Critimation, where I review animated TV shows and films. As always, I do not own any of these films or shows. They are properties of their respected owners. Welcome to the final installment of my Western trilogy. Our first segment is the Ricochet Rabbit episode, Good Little Bad Guy. The short involves an outlaw named Daddy Mumbleweed trying to teach his son to be an outlaw. But as the title suggests, his son is a goody two-shoes of a person. Father decides to teach his son how to hold up a train, but someone had tipped them off to Sheriff Ricochet Rabbit and his trusty deputy Droopalong, who proceed to stop them at the train, during which Ricochet uses one of his famous trick bullets to give Daddy Mumbleweed a hot foot. Next, Daddy tries to teach his son to rob a bank, but he accidentally uses a water squirter. And once again, Ricochet's there to stop him, and uses one of his bullets to trick him out of a stovepipe he's hiding in. Finally, Pa tries to teach his son to rob a stagecoach, but once again, Ricochet is there to stop him, and he gets flattened, quite literally. After being arrested, it is revealed that Mumbleweed's son was the contact who kept tipping them off. Ricochet then mentions that he'll let the son out for good behavior, and the cartoon ends. Well, I didn't see anything special about this particular cartoon. I did like how they used the rule of thirds method as part of the plot. The Mumbleweeds tried to do 3 robberies before being arrested. Also, the ending was kinda cute. For those who are into more retro parodies of the Western genre, this is something that I would recommend. Our next segment is the DuckTales reboot episode, The Outlaw Scrooge McDuck. The episode begins with Louie becoming discouraged about the whole Louie Incorporated thing that had been going on during the second season of which this episode takes place. So Scrooge tells him about a time he was in the Old West, in a town called Gumption. During that time, Scrooge was prospecting for gold, but he gets competition from his old rival Goldie. But things get even worse that when they do find a giant gold nugget, it is claimed by none other than the town's owner, John D. Rockerduck. And while Goldie pins him against Scrooge and tries to get away with the gold, she is stopped by Jeeves, John's butler slash bodyguard. The sheriff, who happens to be fetching Crackshell's ancestor, then throws them in jail, where they meet a time-traveling Gyro Gearloose, who reveals that Rockerduck was nothing but a con man. After being let out by the sheriff, the four catch up to the train Rockerduck is on using rocket horses made by Gyro. While Goldie makes a distraction, Scrooge snags the keys from Rockerduck's belt, allowing him to access the minecart where the gold nugget is, only to be cornered by Jeeves. Thankfully, Goldie returns, along with the sheriff in a Gizmo Duck-like suit as backup. But as the group escape, the Gizmo Duck suit overheats and explodes off the bridge, taking the gold with it. But as luck would have it, the pieces of gold from the explosion went downriver and back into the town, creating a gold reservoir. After finishing his story, Scrooge then tells Louis that he needs to decide what kind of way he needs to make his fortune. But before he could answer, Gyro manages to get back to the present through the use of his bathtub-shaped time machine. The episode ends with Louis calling Goldie and asks if she wants to be his partner for Louie Incorporated. setting up the stage for the next episode in the arc. Now, aside from the backgrounds, which are clearly inspired by Maurice Noble's designs from the Wile E. Coyote cartoons of Warner Brothers, I have to give props to the team who designed the rocket horses as well as the Western Gizmo Duck suit. And I liked how they used Gyro rather than an ancestor of him like Ratchet Gearloose from the comics. But most notably, I was surprised that they incorporated John D. Rockaduck, who was a character that wasn't very well known in the States, as most of his stories were made by Italian writers. Traditionally portrayed as the third richest duck in the world, John D. Rockaduck has the morality of spending money to show his wealth. As the phrase goes, you have to spend money to make money, which makes him a natural enemy of Scrooge. And unlike this episode, Rockaduck hails from England, which makes sense considering most of his comics were made for the European market. But Rockaduck's biggest trait is that he tends to comment on the faults Scrooge has and vice versa, which leads to them bickering a lot. And while this animated take on Rockaduck was enjoyable, I especially liked how they gave him a white suit, which is impractical in the Wild West. The only complaint I had is that they left out a key trait of the character from the comics. Whenever he's humiliated or defeated, he literally eats his hat. But nonetheless, I would recommend this episode to anyone who loves westerns but would like them to pretty much play with the old cliches and make something new out of them. The last topic is the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh episode. The good, the bad, the Tigger. The episode starts with the gang playing with Christopher Robin's toy train. Before going to lunch, Christopher Robin tells the others not to touch the train while he's gone. Unfortunately, Tigger decides to borrow the train regardless and starts it up again. After Rabbit and Piglet find out, we are then brought into a fantasy where everyone's in a Western setting. In this fantasy, Pooh and Tigger are portrayed as train robbers, and Sheriff Piglet has to bring them in, along with the help of Rabbit and Eeyore, who is portrayed as wearing a sombrero for some reason. I guess the writers were fans of Crick-Graw McGraw's sidekick, Bubba Louie. Anyway, after a few failed attempts, the three decide to chase after the train using a handcart, but soon lose control and even pick up Gopher in an old miner's outfit as a stowaway. Meanwhile, Tigger is desperately trying to stop the train but gets hooked up on a mail hook. With Pooh by himself, the train then crashes into the handcart, and everyone flies up into the air and lands on each other, while the train itself is in pieces. Pooh is then arrested for train napping, much to Piglet's disappointment, and is to be sentenced to a swinging the next day. Of course, in order to keep the show kid-friendly, they mean it literally. They have to have him swing on a tire swing. That night, Tigger sneaks in and breaks Pooh out of prison, and they go on a lam. They then decide to fix up the train to the best of their ability in hopes that they wouldn't have to turn themselves in. But the train rolls away and the two get arrested. During which Tigger confesses that he was the mastermind behind the train robbery and Pooh was innocent. The train then reappears out of control and Piglet is captured by it. In order to rescue him, Tigger paints some train tracks around town for the train to follow in the hopes that it would eventually run out of steam. But after waiting for 2 weeks, they just decide to use a banana peel to stop it. After Tigger apologizes for all the trouble, Piglet decides to let him off with a warning. After returning to reality, Christopher Robin returns and offers to let Tigger control the train, which he refuses, showing that he has truly learned his lesson, and ending the cartoon. Having grown up with this episode on VHS, I think this is a good example of teaching kids how to ask before borrowing. And like Boo's other Western adventure, Paw in Order, it acknowledges the fact that it's a fantasy and not reality. My only real complaint is that they tried to put Gopher in two different roles: the prospect of cameos throughout the episode, and the role of the judge, which I found to be a little bit confusing when I was a kid. Nonetheless, I would recommend this to anyone who's a fan of the 90s Winnie the Pooh show. Thanks for tuning in to Critimation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And follow me on Blue Sky. Or support me on Patreon. I'm open to suggestions, and I will see you next time.